I call this meeting of the City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Williams.
I'm here.
Councilmember Baring.
Here.
Councilmember Clay. Here. Councilmember Robinson.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
Councilmember Stepbar.
Here.
Councilmember Rice.
Here.
And before we go to council comments, I'd just like to recognize that the city manager looks a little different tonight. The city manager and the deputy city manager are at the ICMA conference in Richmond, and so we're graced by the presence of Director of Housing and Community Development, Sarah Dane, sitting in. Thank you. Welcome. Hope you have fun tonight.
It's different from this side.
Other council comments? Councilmember Sniffer.
Yes. I have two things I want to talk about. One is I have a confession to make. I believe it was Friday. Isn't that right, Chief?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Friday I was biking to work, which I've tried to do a couple times a week, and I stop at most stop signs, but I don't stop at all stop signs. And unfortunately, I was cruising through one of the stop signs I didn't stop in when the police car, lights, sirens, the whole thing, pulls me over. And, of course, he can't see me from the back, and I'm all whatever, and I can't see him until he rolls down the window, and it was the chief who did the right thing. He both reminded me, shamed me, admonished me, warned me that we had just discussed the new emphasis on enforcing bike riding rules in Tacoma Park. And wasn't I there and paying attention and so on? And I was there and paying attention, but I have to confess, I must have thought it didn't apply to me, because anyway, I went through the stop signs, and the chief was very sweet and kind and gave me a nice lecture. And I went off, and I, as a follow-up, I should tell you that, of course, I subsequently stopped at all the stop signs all the way to work, and it only added about 10 or 15% to my time. It was sort of 45, 46 minutes. So it really wasn't all that bad. And so now I will, in fact, thank you, stop at all the stop signs. That's my confession. And I urge all other bike riders not to get embarrassed by getting stopped by Tacoma Park Police.
Ruben, you'll have to be careful because I know how fast you ride when the speed cameras get placed.
Oh, that's true. You did see me going down there. I am below the speed limit, but I do move along. The other thing is, at lunchtime today, Washington Adventist Hospital had a press briefing for folks in the community, and a number of council members, and I went, mayor as well. Lots of folks were there, Heather Messier and some other folks from elected office, as well as lots of people in the community. And they gave us an overview of the new plan, the new vision. It was just an overview. There were no handouts. We will be having, they will be doing more briefings and passing out more material about it. The short version is they are following their vision of a very health-focused replacement for the hospital at that site. That is, they are taking to heart a lot of citizen comment that they should do what they know best. What they know best is the Adventist healthcare style, which is a very broad-based prevention, fitness, wellness, well-being kind of vision. And I think it will really fit well onto that site and will be appreciated by the community. My observation is that, of course, the devil's always in the details, and we'll have to see exactly what they mean by these kind of broad ideas before the community will be comfortable with it. But I think they are at least headed in the right direction, and I was reassured any number of times that they do want to work extensively with the community as the process of fleshing out the design and implementing whatever gets decided. So I think they put in place a good process. I'll stop.
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. As Councilmember Snipper said, I also attended the Washington Adventist Hospital presentation today. I thought their vision is very exciting. It seems to match very much what I've heard from community members that they would like to see at the site. I think it addresses, from my perspective and from my constituents, it addresses many of the fears that people have had about what happens when the hospital leaves. It also seems to provide resources for all of the different needs that community members within Ward 4 have said that they're hopeful will be left here in Tacoma Park. There's a whole list. I'm sure it's going to appear in the newspaper. I think Ruben mentioned that it's a broad-based vision at this point. I really look forward to when they're able to work with the community and drive some of the things that could be there into specifics about what will be at this site. Thank you.
Councilmember Plank?
A couple comments. One of them is that since I see the police chief in the audience, is that I hope if he hasn't had a chance to yet, that he'll go by and visit the car parts that I left in Barbara Matthews' office from the underside of a vehicle that came careening around the corner at Ethan Allen and Elm, and left the undercarriage part of the wheel well there for us. This happened
Monday.
Apparently 3 times. No, is last Monday? No, it was 2 Mondays ago. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's the flowers, there's the rock, which is, the boulder, and the tree, and then the curbs that were all involved. The flowers were what was most important to the woman who has been planting and watering them and nurturing them for the last several months. But I'm mostly concerned about the crazy behavior. So in case you haven't enjoyed that, also they're really dirty, so don't pick them up. The other thing is that our state delegate, Heather Mazur, has reintroduced the Just Cause eviction legislation that we had submitted last year for a local bill, and I'm happy to see that happen. And it got a little off track last year. People tried to represent it as something that it's not. And I had a couple things to say about that. And one of them is that we talk a lot in Tacoma Park about our commitment to fairness, and we talk a lot about the low-cost housing that we have available. But I'd like to see more people actually engage, and this is an opportunity for people who, aren't landlords or aren't otherwise engaged in the housing market or some of those other processes to actually make a commitment to help people in the community stay in their housing by helping us get the Just Cause eviction law passed. And so I think over the next week I'm going to work with some of the other council members and see if we can devise a strategy that we can all work on together, since we're the ones who proposed this bill. The Just Cause eviction bill is really just about not evicting people for no reason at all. If you pay, I don't know about you guys, but I paid $1,500 to move into my place when I had to pay for the moving van. It's a house that I own now, but when I moved out here I had to pay for the moving costs, and every time I move, I have enough stuff now that it actually costs me a lot of money to move, and that's a big investment for people to make, to just be able to be evicted at the end of the year, so that a landlord can, turn over the place, do a paint job, keep a little extra deposit, or if they don't, they want to retaliate against somebody. There's really nothing to stop that from happening. And so I'm hoping that people will engage on this issue throughout the course of this legislative session so that we can get this passed. Thank you.
Councilmember Wright.
Just one set of comments. The mayor and I met today with UIA, the plan developer for the Metro site, to see what they had done in terms of revising their plan. They did make some revisions to the plan, solves some of the issues that the city has raised around transit issues. We have received a copy of the plan. I think we're still waiting for an electronic version, and we'll circulate that to council members, but also we'll put it on the city website with the other Metro documents. The plan is actually to have EYA come and brief the council in public and invite everyone who wants to come and comment and look at the plan. Again, I don't think it solves all the issues, and the council hasn't come to a conclusion or deliberated about where they are in that, because most of them haven't seen the plan yet. But just want to give everyone an update on that.
Councilmember Barry.
For those of you who've had a chance to motor over or bicycle over, in Ruben's case, to the other side of town, will notice the pedestrian safety fencing going up on New Hampshire Avenue and also along University Boulevard. As you recall, this was part of an effort that began several years ago after the deaths of 7 pedestrians in a single year, one of whom was a very small child being pushed by her mother in a perambulator. It was an effort by a number of groups and individuals, certainly the Business Association and the Pedestrian Safety Committee, the Police Department, other branches of the city, and support from the state. It was a $17 million project, funds that were pumped into that area. And there was a lot of haggling over the height of the fence and the color of it, but people finally came to a consensus, and actually aesthetically it looks pretty nice, despite the fact that it's there not for aesthetics but really to protect the life and limb of our citizens and many people who traverse those busy and dangerous places every day. So I think it was a great win for the area and for the safety of the public generally. And also we got some blacktop thrown in that goes partway up New Hampshire. But certainly we need the rest of it up to the district line, because the road bed is very bad and often very dangerous, especially when it's wet. So we're hoping that we can push, even in these difficult economic times, the state to provide the funding which it's promised, but has so far not delivered, to pave the rest of it. So go and take a look. Big changes in that part of the world.
Councilmember Robinson.
Doug, you reminded me that this coming Saturday from 10 to noon on New Hampshire Avenue, there's going to be a cleanup, and I encourage anybody, whether they're in my ward, Ward 3, or elsewhere in the city, to come out and pitch in. There's a free T-shirt and some refreshments in it for you.
And I'll just add 2 quick little items to let people know. 2 of the groups that came to visit me during my office hours last week, just to let you know the types of groups that come in, or individuals. In this case, it was groups. I had a visit and a nice conversation with 2 representatives from the Maryland Restaurant Association, who came to talk about foie gras and share some information that was very interesting and helpful. Not that I made any commitments that the city would change anything on what we had done, but it was very helpful to get their information and follow-up. And also 2 representatives from sister cities, and they brought a bunch of information if we might be interested in establishing a sister city relationship or reestablishing a sister city relationship. And they were going to see what they had downtown as far as their records and what they thought the status of the formerly existing, and I'm not sure of the status, sister city relationship that we had a number of years ago. And yeah, so it was just, kind of what was the status of those? Was there a continuing process? Did we want to look at any new possibilities? I've had visits from representatives from an area in Cameroon, and had that discussion with the mayor in Guatemala a number of months ago, all of whom have expressed interest in ties. So it's an area that there has been some back and forth on, and some expressions of interest from people who have ties to this community. And they wanted to give me more information about that, so I just wanted to let people know that. And I don't think we have anything for the record and I don't think we have any additional agenda items, but just as far as an agenda scheduling update, I would remind everyone that because of Rosh Hashanah starting next week, that we do not have a meeting scheduled for next Monday night, so we will be back here after tonight in 2 weeks. And also to let people know that, as Councilmember Wright mentioned, that we met with EYA about the Tacoma Metro, and I promised them that we would schedule a briefing from them on that revised plan, and the time frame for that is October or November. So we haven't figured out when that will be yet, but that will be coming up sometime in the next 2 months. And now it's time for public comment. If anybody has any comments on anything not on our regular meeting agenda, so if you have any comments on anything on our work session agenda or anything not on the agenda at all, now's the time to make your comments. And if you would like to share those with us, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes, and please identify yourself.
My name's Mr. Lovelace, Pat Lovelace, 7620 Maple Avenue, Tacoma Park, Ward 4. I'd like to also ask quite a favor, if you could, because on Saturday the 5th of October, Sunday the 5th of October, we're having the street festival up here. And if they could pass the word around to make sure that when you advertise this or whenever you meet people about this, to have them watch their children and not to tell them to wait here, I got to get something in my car, while the parents walk off and leave a 3-year-old girl in the crowd alone, because they did that when I was up there. I heard it happen. And the mother was about a half an hour getting a blanket and something from her purse, because a kid can disappear in a moment, and once that happens, there's nothing you can do about it. And I don't think Tacoma Park needs a tragedy like that. No parents need that, and I don't need it. Also, a question came up about voting again. Now, the deadline to register to vote, I believe, is October the 14th. The other thing is what are the rules on absentee ballots? And also, if you land in a hospital right before you vote, is there an emergency ballot system do we have? Those 2 questions I'd like answered. And also, what's the rules on ex-felons allowed to be able to vote? Because people keep telling me they're not allowed to vote because they're in prison as a felon, and they're out of prison now. And I'd hate to see us continuing to take their rights away as basic Americans, because that's one of our most fundamental rights, is the right to vote. And I don't want to see anyone lose it because they're a felon or they made a mistake in their past. And once they serve their time, my understanding is they were no longer criminals, and they no longer had that held against them. So I'd like to see their right to vote restored, so they can take part in this historic election. And main thing, it's also only 42 days from tomorrow that you're going to be able to vote. So please, everybody, get out there and register to vote. And I want to see as many people from Tacoma Park down there to vote. I'll be at the polls with that big peace sign, and you can't miss it. And that's what I'm voting for. I'm trying to get this world to be a peaceful world, so we don't have to have any more troops killed. We don't have any more people starving out there and not getting health insurance. If you really want health care, come on out and vote for it. If you really want housing, come out and vote for it. If you really love your family and your children, come out and vote for them. You know, because that's how we get our government. We got to vote. 42 more days, Tacoma Parkers. I want to see you out there. Help me out. Get out there, register to vote, and vote. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And thank you for pointing out the street festival. We were remiss in not reminding folks about that again tonight. And I believe your comment about convicted felons voting, I may not have all the details correct, but relying on my memory, I believe that the state law is that convicted felons of one felony who have served their time and who have finished any parole or probation or any of those types of things are eligible to vote.
And Mr. Lovelace, I think you've asked some good questions about absentee ballots and emergency absentee ballots, and I'll provide those answers during the council comments next week so that the whole community receives the information.
You won't be here next week, remember?
That's why I have you as an aide, so you can remind me.
That's why they call me the peace delegate, right?
That's right.
I remind you peacefully.
All right. Patty's a hard act to follow. I'm Seth Grimes. I'm here as president of the Old Town Residents Association. Since there's no public comment on presentations or consent agenda items, I want to make comment now that in response to a request of Bruce Levin, the property owner where Avenue Oven intends to locate, I polled members of the Old Town Residents Association about their support or if they might disfavor a liquor license for Avenue Oven, and of the people on our email list, approximately a third responded. We had 20 responses representing 26 individuals, all unanimously in favor of the granting of a liquor license to Avenue Oven. As you all know already, and you wouldn't have put the resolution on the consent agenda if you didn't know this, there's very wide popular support for this restaurant and other restaurants, as well as city efforts to ensure the continued viability of other restaurants in Tacoma Park. And I'll just close by saying that I'm glad that council members have taken an active interest in that latter business and ensuring the continued viability of other restaurants. I think that new restaurants opening up will be good for all of the food dining places here in Tacoma Park. So members of the Old Town Residents Association are overwhelmingly in favor of a liquor license for Avenue Oven. Thank you.
Thanks.
Andy Kellerman from Philadelphia Avenue, and along the same lines of what's good for the city, something else that was not mentioned is the antique and classic car show on the 28th in Old Town. And I think there may be some people who would be interested in hearing about it, although some of the signs have been out there, but it didn't get the legs that it really should. And I think Greg Morin, the gentleman who owns the ice cream place, he's trying to make this a yearly event, and I think that would be very, very nice if that worked out. Thank you.
Thanks for that reminder. Is there anyone else who wishes to make comment? Seeing none, we'll move along to city manager's comments. Do you have anything to share with us? All right, then we'll go to the first item on the regular agenda, which is a presentation on the planned restaurant at 7003 Carroll Avenue, site of the former Italiano's restaurant. And Alana Blanchard is here with the one of the applicants, and Roz Grigsby of Main Street Tacoma and Old Town Business Association.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here with Gillian Clark, who's representing Avenue Oven, and Roz Grigsby, who's representing the Old Town Business Association Main Street Tacoma program.
Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Ms. Clark is going to present the concept for Avenue Oven. She's here today to request council support for both obtaining a liquor license for beer and wine, and also financing from the Neighborhood Business Works program, which is a state of Maryland program for small businesses, and which all businesses in Tacoma Park are eligible for. In the interest of time.
Thank you. Well, sure everybody has seen what's been going on. We've just started the demo process in creating the restaurant that will be Avenue Oven in the spot at 7001 Carroll Avenue, with much community support, considering we have actual community ownership involved as well. So the concept basically is hopefully before the year's over, or early 2009, to open a 60-seat, full-service family restaurant at that site, serving beer and wine, and the hours be Sunday to Saturday, 11 to 11. We will be serving brunch on Sunday, and the concept is to do American food, but sort of from the eyes of a Eastern European immigrant, as they would take it, arriving probably on Ellis Island and living in New York and opening a restaurant. So it'll be 100% scratch kitchen, primarily serving baked goods for Sunday brunch, and that's why we called it oven, because there's going to be a big oven. We bake our own breads and do a lot of baking and regular food, American style, with a little bit of an Eastern European flavor. One of the things, just as a hint, one of the things that is how that will manifest itself is we're going to do our own pickles and do our own pickling and that kind of stuff and canning. So we're very anxious to get started, and if everything goes well, we hope to be open December, maybe January. We have a preliminary plan for the design, and that is, depending on the results of this meeting and other things that are going on, to submit our plans to the county. And once that happens, we can get started. Hopefully the end result of this meeting is that we can go ahead and get a liquor license so that we can serve beer and wine. And the focus of that is to serve beer and wine of, the caliber that Montgomery County will allow us, but also that sort of fits in with the theme. So it's, it won't be the kind of beer drinking hangout, primarily just beer and wine with dinner and that kind of thing. So there won't be a bar, but there will be beer and wine service in the restaurant.
Any questions? I would say that I think a couple of us were at the presentation that you made in late August to a crowd of about 50 people, which was remarkable for a weekday evening in August, I thought, and provided a few more details there. And I think people were quite enthralled with the idea and ready to welcome you with open arms and patronize the restaurant. I think everybody has felt the need for a long time to, I think I said at the time, people are hungering for a restaurant. Councilmember Siemens.
Yes, I wondered if the police chief has weighed in on any opinion with the beer and wine license in the city.
Completely supporting it. We attended the meeting in August, and we think it's good for the community, and we'll monitor like we do it. We'll work with them to make sure we have safe and good place to operate.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wright.
I would just say thank you. As anxious as you are to get started, I think equally anxious the residents of Tacoma Park and the surrounding neighborhood are anxious to have you in there and come to eat your wonderful food. And I really appreciate the way you've gone about putting the financing together and the community aspect of the restaurants. Thanks again.
And
Can I just add a comment?
Sure.
I just am here representing the Old Tacoma Business Association. The Board of Directors voted at the board meeting last week also in support of this, hoping that council will weigh in favorably.
And I patronized your previous restaurant,
Oh,
Colorado
thank you.
Kitchens,
Yes.
and mighty good food.
Yes.
Any other comments? Okay, I think we're happy to support the liquor license, and we're happy to support application for funding from the state program, as we have done for other people, and we can't wait.
Thanks so much.
So that'll be the item on our consent agenda. Thanks.
Thank you.
The next item is a resolution of condolence to the family and friends of Dean Hoagie, and I believe Councilmember Wright can speak to that.
First, I want to move the
I'd like to second it.
Moved by Councilmember Wright, seconded by Councilmember Siemens.
my council colleagues and I are all express our deepest condolences to the Hoagie family. Dean was, I only knew Dean for a short period of time, because I haven't lived here in Tacoma Park that long, but in the time I did know him, I found him to be an incredibly warm, thoughtful community member, engaged in activities while I was living in Tacoma Park, having to do with the Independence Day Parade, and also very involved in his church, and very focused on the greening of that church, making it an environmentally responsible church in all of its activities. So we're very sorry to lose Dean as a member of our community, but this is a little comment or a little thing that we can offer is this resolution to his family.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Mr. Hoagie was a dedicated, active member of Tacoma Park community and contributed to many of the civic activities such as the Independence Day parades through the years and in other ways. And I think the thing that touched me the most with Dean was his interest in the government of Tacoma Park and always stepping forward to voice his opinion about how we could have a better government here. And I think he's a big loss to the community.
Is there anybody who'd like to comment on the resolution?
You know about the memorial service? Want to announce that?
The memorial service is on the 27th, but I can't remember the time.
Yeah, there's a memorial service at the Tacoma.
You have to go to the microphone.
Actually, since I'm standing here, I don't have anything to add to what was said, but I'll note that Dean was also secretary of our Residents Association. There's a memorial service at the Tacoma Park Presbyterian Church. I'm pretty sure it's 2:30 p.m. on this coming Saturday.
And this Saturday is the 27th?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? Any other council comments? All those in favor of the resolution of condolence, please say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. And I'll pass this down if you want to give that to the family. The next item on our agenda is a resolution opposing slot machines in Maryland. And I will again turn to Councilmember Wright.
First, I would move the item.
I'll second it.
Moved by Councilmember Wright, seconded by Councilmember Siemens.
It's pretty straightforward. On November 4th, at the election, there's a statewide referendum to amend the state constitution to allow slot machine gambling. I'm putting 15,000 slot machines at venues in Anne Arundel County, Cecil County, Worcester County, Allegheny County, and Baltimore City. This resolution is in opposition of that referendum, requesting that all citizens of Maryland vote against it. And the main reasons we're against it are, first, that almost every dollar that goes into slot machines would be spent on other more productive activities. Gambling draws spending away from legitimate businesses like restaurants, shops, and other attractions, resulting in no real economic gain. Far from providing tax relief, slots are unlikely to provide a net revenue for the state. Any revenue will be offset by increased costs for fighting crime, crime prevention, and social services necessary to address the negative impacts of gambling. The state will not receive revenue from the slots for, I think, 2 years, which will not help with the immediate and pressing budget shortfalls. The combination of casino wealth and regulatory power of government can lead to extraordinary influence peddling and, in the worst case, to political corruption. The extraordinary influence peddling by the gambling industry will lead to increased pressure on the state legislature and citizens to authorize additional slot machines and other forms of gambling, which will likely result in additional gambling authorization. Former Maryland Attorney General Joseph Curran's report on casinos found that casinos would bring a substantial increase in crime to our state. There would be more violent crime, more crimes against property, more insurance fraud, more white-collar crimes, more juvenile crime, more drug and alcohol-related crimes, more domestic violence and child abuse, and more organized crime. I suggest people read this report online. It's attached to the packet. It's a pretty comprehensive report and looks really what has happened in other states that have allowed gambling. Gambling is a regressive tax typically paid by the lower income among us. Bankruptcies, divorce, and suicides increase whenever casinos and slot gambling is allowed to prey on a community. Gambling is the fastest growing form of addiction among U.S. teens, women, and senior citizens. Casinos and slots facilities are a convenient fund for organized crime to launder money from other activities such as drug and prostitution. Our citizens want proactive leadership in the state that seeks to grow our economy and tax base through encouraging innovative and creative good-paying jobs in the field of renewable energy, energy efficiency, technology, high-tech, and biotech. So therefore, it be resolved that the City Council of Tacoma Park opposes passage of question 2 on the November 4th ballot that would amend the Maryland State Constitution to allow slot machine gambling in Maryland. Be it further resolved that the Council encourages all residents of Maryland to vote no on question 2. So to me, it's a pretty straightforward dollar and cents issue here, that what gambling will give us is far outweighed by the negative impacts of gambling on the state as a whole. And I think we can, I know it's a tough budget times, but this isn't going to solve our problems in the short term, and in the long term, if we pay for all the increased issues related to crime and other social services that gambling will bring, it won't help us in the long term either. So I know it's a tough situation, but we need real solutions and real leadership at the state level on this. Thank you.
And if I can just add on that, it's being sold as something that will help education funding in particular. I know that the language that for the ballot measure was changed slightly to acknowledge that it wasn't just going for education, but that a lot of the money would go to the people who run slots. And it was originally proposed as something that would help the Maryland horse racing industry. That's now kind of gone by the wayside. I think that the supposed help for education in many ways will just give exactly the wrong message to our children, that gambling is a way to pay for their education, and I don't think we want to gamble on their education. So for all the reasons Councilmember Wright cited, I think it's a fairly obvious vote no. I know a lot of people don't feel that way, but I think there are times when you just have to take the right stand and acknowledge that it's the wrong solution at the wrong time, and there never will be a right time for that solution. Councilmember Robinson.
My stepdad was a manager of a hotel for a period, and he told a story about one of his employees who would, from time to time, not show up at home. And in those days, they were paid in cash. This was back in the, I think it was in the 40s. He wouldn't arrive. He wouldn't get home, and his wife would call my stepdad and say, he didn't come home. So my dad knew right where to go. He'd go down to the corner bar where there was basically a gambling machine, and the guy would have his quarters stacked up, and he'd just run through them all. He'd run through his whole week's pay, and if my dad was there early enough, he'd salvage some of the payday's proceeds before they were all run through. And that always comes back to me when I think about this. It's an addiction. Why sponsor an addiction? So I'm all for voting for this.
Councilmember Stevens.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to thank Councilmember Wright for introducing this resolution. I think it's a question, as the Mayor said, of right and wrong, and I think that our position on this is right, and so I will vote for this.
Is there any public comment on this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. We now move to the consent agenda. There are 5 items on the consent agenda: the resolution in support of the proposed restaurant at 7003 Carroll Avenue, a resolution accepting the recommendations and conclusions of the June 2008 report of the Tacoma Park Recreation Committee, a single reading ordinance authorizing purchase of new police department uniforms, a resolution authorizing execution of a memorandum of understanding with the Tacoma Foundation for the Community Center Mosaic Project, and a single reading ordinance awarding a contract for speed cameras. Since there are two single reading ordinances, we will need to have a roll call vote on the consent agenda. Yeah, Councilmember Snipper.
I don't know exactly how to do this, but Councilmember Wright brought it to my attention. Since I have a financial interest in the proposed restaurant at 7003 Carroll Avenue, I would like to recuse myself from voting on that particular item.
Councilmember Wright.
And I just wanted to clarify on the Recreation Committee, we're just accepting the recommendations, meaning we're taking them in. We're not necessarily saying that the council agrees specifically with all of the recommendations in the report, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Move the consent agenda.
Second.
That was moved by Councilmember Clay, seconded by Councilmember Wright. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Williams?
Aye.
Councilmember Barron?
Aye.
Councilmember Clay?
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson?
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens?
Aye.
Councilmember Slipper?
Aye.
Councilmember Wright?
Aye.
Okay. Did you want to abstain on the consent agenda rather than to
Just
say
that
aye?
one item.
Well, but you need to abstain on the whole consent agenda.
Does that how it work?
Yes.
Okay, then I will abstain. I change my vote to abstain.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is a work session item on the Safe Tacoma update and introduction of the new operations manager. Do we? Chief, do we need to move that item back? Do we need to move that item back?
Which one?
Safe to go.
I think they're out. Oh, he wants to get them?
Yeah.
I know they're ready to go.
Yeah, okay. You know, we're on time. Your item is up. We were all set for the agenda item, and there's nobody here. We were ready to delay you. I guess you couldn't believe we were on time.
Here, go ahead.
Need another chair?
Yeah.
Should be over there.
Let's get started while Andy gets or, I don't know, if Dave can come up with this meeting. So, thanks for having us here tonight. I'm Seth Grimes, president of Safe Tacoma. I suppose I'll introduce Chief Rakucci, you all know. Ronnie Miller, our operations manager, Andy Kellerman, our board member and treasurer, Faith Wheeler, our vice president, who is also a NC4B02 commissioner. Thank you for having us here again tonight and for the support that the City of Tacoma Park has shown us by way of funding and in many other ways in the past. I'm not going to talk much. I'm just going to turn it over to Ronnie to introduce herself, and rather than me say anything about our programming, I'll turn it over to Ronnie, and then she'll get back to the others of us as needed. So Ronnie Miller is Safe Tacoma's operations manager. She started in July, so she's been on the job for a bit less than 3 months now, and we hope she'll be on the job for quite a while going forward. And Ronnie,
welcome.
Good evening, and thank you for having us. My name is Ronnie Miller, and like Seth said, I started in July, and it has been lots of fun. It's been interesting so far. My background has been in managing nonprofit and human service agencies, so I enjoy working for and with people. I guess I'll basically start with our reporting processes. And what we do is we submit a monthly report to our grant monitors, which includes Chief Rakucci and Commander Brown, where we keep them apprised of all the activities that we've been involved in for that month, as well as any upcoming future plans that we might have. The big event, which was one of the first things that I was responsible for coordinating, was the National Night Out event, which I have to say went very well. We were able to set up our table at the Tacoma Park Metro Station, which was wonderful. It enabled us to interact with a lot of commuters as they were coming out of the train station. We gave out, well, we started our safety whistle pilot program in which we distributed whistles to commuters in exchange for their signing up and providing us with their contact information so that we could get some information from them to see what issues as far as safety were more pertinent to them. We signed up, there were about 175 completed sign-up sheets. In less than an hour, or maybe an hour, all the whistles were gone. People seemed very interested. And I mean, we hadn't even finished setting up, and it was just this influx, and everyone wanted to know what we were doing. So they were very eager. The residents were extremely eager. Of the 175 completed sign-up sheets, we also had some questions on the bottom asking specific questions as far as if they would be interested in joining a citizens patrol in their neighborhood, or if they wanted to volunteer with Safe Tacoma, or things like conflict resolution training. And actually we had 29 individuals that were interested in joining a citizens patrol. 3 were already involved in patrol in their area. 29 individuals also wanted to arrange a police home safety inspection, which we distributed that information to Chief Rakucci and Commander Brown, and they will be following up to schedule those appointments with those interested people. 97 individuals are interested in joining the Alert Tacoma email list. 2 stated that they were already on the list, and 30 individuals considered volunteering with Safe Tacoma. And then 59 of those individuals that responded to us are interested in conflict resolution programming. One of our programs that was conducted over the summer at the Recreation Center here, as well as the one in D.C., was in conflict resolution. And that went pretty well, in which the programming was done with the youth that would attend the different programs at the community centers. And that program was finished August 15th, and we met with the trainers to discuss the program outcomes as well as to get any suggestions for future programming. And out of that, we are presently planning additional programs at the 2 centers again for the fall. I've met with the managers, and they feel that there is a need for some male as well as female empowerment type programming for the youth, to assist them with learning just basic skills, life skills. So I'm currently in the process of developing those programs, and hopefully it will start within the next couple of months. In addition to that program, we are also, this week, we'll be meeting with the Tacoma Park Community Action Group to discuss other ideas as well. We have a meeting with the Joint School of Carpentry this week to discuss pre-apprenticeship programs and the possibility of us, having a partnership to do that. And myself and Faith have also been attending and been part of the Ward 4 Substance Abuse Coalition and the Truancy Coalition at Coolidge Senior High. So we have been actively engaged and continue to look for additional avenues in which we can reach the community as far as crime prevention. I think at this time I will turn it over to Seth to discuss the neighborhood safety perspectives.
Just before we leave that, can I ask a question? Do you have a breakdown of those people who filled out the survey and National Night Out, percentage of Maryland versus DC? Was that a breakdown that you all looked at?
Yeah, we did not report on that here in the report that's in your packet. We do, let me emphasize, the 175 that Ronnie mentioned, we have names for all of them. We have email addresses for most of them, phone numbers, whatever. So these are actual people. We know who they are. It's part of engaging the community. Some of those people don't live in Tacoma, DC, or Tacoma Park. There were someone from Mount Rainier, from Hyattsville, from parts of DC. But those are people who use the Tacoma transit facilities. So in any case, in terms of signing up for neighborhood patrols, it just occurred to me earlier today, actually, I think only like 4 of the 29 were Tacoma Park, Maryland residents. The majority of them were district residents. So not everything is split evenly all the time. So we have a spreadsheet. We'd be happy to share it with the chief or council members in confidence, of course. It's, if you want to see it to understand, who was responding. But these are people who use the Tacoma Transit Facility. That includes our neighbors. It includes people from Tacoma, DC. It also includes people who take the buses from our Tacoma Metro station and so on.
And if I can just point out to 3 of the 4 of you that you've got your papers on the microphones. It makes quite the racket, and I think the chief was the biggest offender, so we'll have to lecture him about something that he should have known about because we've talked about it in the past.
Not when I've been here.
So let me pick up with this neighborhood safety perspectives program. This is something that I've been wanting to do for quite a long time, and it's something that we now have the personnel resources to actually carry out, which is a physical assessment of the conditions on the street. That includes lighting. It includes all kinds of stuff that make people who walk around our neighborhoods, who live in our neighborhoods, less safe, people who patronize our commercial areas. And it's physical conditions that affect the perceptions of safety, which are equally, no, I won't say they're equally important, they're very important. So this is programming that not only looks at conditions, but does it periodically. And part of the reason for doing periodically is that we can then measure progress. Measure progress in getting things corrected, measure progress in improving the overall conditions. And this focuses on, let's say, the areas within a block of the Old Tacoma Commercial Corridor. We can expand it to other Old Tacoma areas or other neighborhoods, for that matter, later once we get this going. And then the other aspect is a periodic, meaning every 6 months, survey of attitudes towards safety, and also ask people what makes you feel unsafe in neighborhoods. You can read this for yourselves. We have invited reaction from our stakeholders, and we hope to get this implemented over the coming weeks. This isn't the kind of program that costs a lot of money. It does cost some time in terms of, for instance, having police representatives just walk through the neighborhoods with us and so on. And I think it's something that we can do that will tangibly improve conditions, not only for public safety, but general livability of the community. We included this in the packet. We asked for this to be included in the packet as a sample of the programming, of the type of documentation for programming that we plan to put forward in the future to make sure that everything we do is upfront and visible and accountable, and that you see that we have included ways of measuring the effects of what we're doing in our programming initiatives.
I believe that's it.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions? Councilmember, right. We'll just work this way. I see these 3.
Just wanted to make sure I understood. So on the budget page, we have about $65,000 left from the 75 originally appropriated. Is that right? We've spent about $10,000 so far.
You gave us, the City of Tacoma Park has given us $30,876.86. The balance of that, we've spent, about $11,000 of that, but you haven't given us $44,000, which would be discussed by the council as agreed when we when you enacted the memorandum of understanding, in approximately 6 months, we've discussed with City Clerk Carpenter November 10th or 17th for that follow-up meeting.
But
And
of
at
the
that-
total 75, we have about, what sounds like 64 left.
Yes, we've spent $11,000 of City of Tacoma Park money.
And then have we made any progress on identifying other grant sources or opportunities where we're going to apply for where you guys are going to apply for money? Because my recollection is that the idea was that this was almost like seed funding to get things started, to jumpstart and match what the DC had put in, and we were going to seek over time to raise additional money.
When we met with Commander Brown, she was very eager to know if we would be funded for future years, because she said that now that we have the momentum going, she would not like to see it stopped. So she was very concerned about the funding piece.
So the district is trying to give us money in the same way that they have in the past. I don't believe that it is the desire of the council, at least expressed in the past, to do the same thing. So yes, we've explored grant funding. We have come across a number of sources that give grants like $3,000 at a time. It's much less than we need, but we hadn't contemplated starting to apply for them until 2009. The funding that you have allocated for us, assuming that you give us the remainder in November, should carry us through our fiscal year 2009, which runs until September 30th. So it's not an immediate need. We need to get on it, but we're more concerned with getting these programming steps going right this minute. Oh, yeah. We actually gave back $75,000 to the district that they allocated in their FY 2008 budget, and we told them not to put any money in their did I get the years right? Our 2009 budget, I forget which it was.
Councilmember Klein.
Well, kind of looking at sort of two sides of the issue, but first I would like to point out that the cost to do this in all 6 wards every year would be $450,000. And I am looking at the CSAFE folks out there in the audience. I'm sure they would love to have a $75,000 stream of funds as well every year. So 2 things. One is I look at this and I see half of my constituents in Long Branch and Sauska neighborhoods looking at this and going, gosh, this is great, why aren't you doing this in my community? How come you're only doing this in one small section of the city?
Why aren't they doing it? You see
I'm
who's here.
now, actually. Thanks. So half of them will say that. So, how come the city's not doing this in my section of the city? So the other thing they're going to look at is where it says it may be desirable for the Tacoma Park police representatives to jointly take part in the assessments around the Tacoma Metro Station and on border streets. And they're going to say, gosh, I hope that the engagement, to the level that this is detailed, doesn't take police resources out of our section of the city, because we want to make sure we have police resources as well. And then the other side of me is saying, wow, I don't want to be the Ward 1, Ward 3 representative or the mayor when somebody gets their first letter, communication, identifying the concern and suggesting corrective steps delivered to property owner and tenant, if applicable, about leaning street signs, poorly maintained shrubbery, trees, grass, or plants, their porch lights not being on after dark, neighborhood complaints about improper noise activities or usages. It seems a little beyond the level at which I guess I would like to see the police department engaging with our citizens, even if they're not in my ward. I would watch out for that. It seems like that could come back to bite you in the butt.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. And it's nice to meet you, Ronnie.
Thank you.
I'm really glad to see this come back to us, and really happy to see the growth in the organization that we've seen over the past few months since the last time you were here in front of us. Certainly happy to see that you've got a director and can see the impact that's already had on the organization and accomplishing things and preparing and organizing things for the future. I just look forward to the work that you're doing with the young people in the community, and I think the programs that you have identified here for the young people are perfect. I think they're greatly needed, and I try to support you in whatever way I can.
Thank you.
Councilmember Robinson.
Yeah, welcome, Ronnie.
Thank you.
I'm intrigued by a couple of things. One is the assessment area and the blocks. You've got a list of all the blocks and so forth, and I'm wondering if over time that's going to be, you're going to kind of track what happens in all that, in all those areas. I'm assuming that that's what's in your mind to do.
Yes.
And the other part that I'm curious about is how in the future you'll try to match kids with opportunities. You mentioned a little bit about that program. Now I don't recall exactly which one you said, but early on in what you were talking about, some program for employment or for
Pre-apprenticeship.
Pre-apprenticeship. That's what got me thinking. Yeah. And tell me a little bit more about the pre-apprenticeship program.
I think that the goal is to provide those youth, older, 17, 18 and higher, with some skills, again. Typically, the pre-apprenticeship programs not only provide them with the skill as far as maybe carpentry or whatever the trade is, but also provide them with employment readiness skills. What it means to get up every day, get yourself ready, get dressed, get to work on time, and everything that is involved in that and the responsibilities with that. And I think that is very important because there's a lot of young people that really don't have the skills. So in addition to learning a trade, they'll also be entering the world of work and everything that's involved with that.
So you call it pre-apprenticeship. Is that an existing program, a pre-apprenticeship program, or is that is that something that you're creating?
If I may answer that question, I had the opportunity to go down and talk with the Carpenters Union about their pre-apprenticeship program, and it's open to young people in the community, men and women, 18-year-old or older, and it does, as Ronnie said, it prepares them to enter the apprenticeship program. The pre-apprenticeship program teaches them the life skills that are necessary, like showing up on time for work, things like that. That also, it basically gives them all of the prerequisites, or helps them to reach all the prerequisites that are necessary to join the apprenticeship program.
Okay, in the trades.
In the carpentry trade, yes. And once they complete the pre-apprenticeship program, they can then, they will have a spot in the apprenticeship program where they actually learn the trade skills that were necessary to get the job. During the time they're in the apprenticeship program, they're paid a very nice wage. The pre-apprenticeship program, they're not paid to go to. It's an educational process to qualify them for the apprenticeship program.
I see. Okay, thanks.
I just had one or two quick comments on the one on your focus area. I noticed in looking at the Westmoreland Avenue, it might be more accurate to put 6900 and 7000 block, because that block changes mid-block. It looks like one block, but it's two, and you'd end up with the piece farther away and not the piece closer in. So that's a more accurate description. And the other thing, I just wanted to take one piece of what Councilmember Clay commented on. I had somewhat the same reaction on the porch lights not on after dark and inadequate after dark lighting. I thought, depending on how you approach it, it can be good to point out that it's a public safety matter to have that on, and if the whole neighborhood does it, it's a much safer neighborhood. I know that kind of in the abstract, telling somebody to turn their porch light on might or might not be received well. I know there are nights when I make it a point to turn mine on, and there are nights when I make it a point not to turn mine on. And there's different messages involved in each, but I think the overall public safety message is very important. Any other questions? Councilmember Wright.
Just a few comments. One, I want to say thank you to Seth, Andy, and Faith, and the other members of the board who volunteer their time, and other members of the community that have been engaged in volunteering. And if I didn't say it before, Ronnie, I'm glad to have you aboard finally. I think we're starting to get traction here. And I assumed that you would be, you would couch those suggestions in the right terminology, and explain the reasons why in an encouraging way, as opposed to a laying down the law sort of way.
Which would be consistent with the approach that our police department takes in a number of instances in approaching people and educating them on the best way to be helpful members of the community. And I'd add my thanks and appreciation for Ronnie being on board, and appreciation to Safe Tacoma and to the leadership provided by Seth and Andy and Faith and others in bringing it to fruition.
I just wondered also, Mayor, if the chief had anything he wanted to add or say about his...
Well, as I said tonight, we approved the disbursement. I'm working with them. I played a very active part in the selection of Ronnie, and she worked very closely with us on National Night Out. Seth continues to keep me informed of what they're doing, and we have a meeting tomorrow morning, as we will do on a monthly basis, to continue, and the police department will support the activities, and we'll continue to work with them and their initiatives. And I would also, in response to Colleen's comments, obviously I represent all 6 districts, and I take that very seriously, and I think everybody up here knows I will continue to work with all 6 wards to make sure they get the same type of service from our police department.
I'm not worried about you.
Okay.
But you know the calls I'm going to get.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so thank you all very much, and that was the first of the many items on tonight's agenda that are part of Public Safety Night. And I know that the next item we have scheduled for 45 minutes, and we're now 8:45, and I guess I'll ask my colleagues, do you want to take a quick break now? Do you want to do a long item and then rush to the finish and probably not do a break? Or what's your pleasure? Break's fine?
I'm okay with no break.
Break? No break?
No break.
No break? We'll keep going.
Colleen? Huh?
You need a few minutes to set up?
Why don't, before we break, let me just introduce Colleen and give you an idea of what we're going to do, and then we take a break and we'll set up for the PowerPoint so you can move out of the audience.
Okay, we'll do it that way then.
Is that okay?
Sure. And that way the clerk gets a break too.
Good evening. Thank you for having us tonight. One of the first requests I had of the council was a approval of a crime analyst, which you approved in our first budget. And the results are sitting beside me tonight. Ms. Kylene Louie, who comes to us from Michigan State University, formerly from Pennsylvania. She obtained her Master's of Science in Criminal Justice and participated in our process. We feel very pleased to have someone of her knowledge and her talents with us. She's got a very interesting resume, and that she's done a lot of work in the criminal justice system. Got a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice, then a master's degree from Michigan State University. She came on board last December. A part of our cooperative effort with Montgomery County Police, she did on-job training with them, with the criminal crime analysts at the Silver Spring Station. She works very closely with the analysts of all 5 districts, their main crime analysts, their crimes against person analysts. We have a very close relationship with the county crime analyst. She works for Prince George's County, works with District of Columbia. We have a very good relationship. The exchange of information goes back and forth. She's been a valuable part of our team in putting out information to our officers on crime patterns and things that are occurring. As you well know now, you get a monthly ward report. what she prepares for you all, and we're going to go into more depth some of the things she's doing tonight with our PowerPoint presentation. So we will take a break, and then I'm going to keep quiet, and I'm going to let Colleen run the show and explain to you what we're doing in the way of crime analysts. I think it's been a great addition to the city. I know it's been a great addition to the department. I think more of our citizens, when they see this tonight, will take more advantage of questions and calls they can do to her. And like I've said to you at all times, she's more than available. If you got a question on something, she'll be able to get you the information, or I'll get it for you. But we're very fortunate to have such a talented person working for us. I know the county's already sneaking around, but I've already told them to stay out of our territory. Because she's got just a wonderful working relationship with them, and that's what's really helped us. And it's part of what was one of our goals that you had for me when I got here, and this is one that's already been accomplished. So if we'll take a break, Mayor, we'll set up.
Okay. We'll be back at 8:55 on that clock. We'll take our seats in the audience for the presentation. We'll roll the presentation at 8:55. Anybody who's not back in their seat misses. Huh?
Okay. Okay.
We're going to get going with the presentation.
All right. Okay. If everyone's ready, I'll start. Okay, so the majority of information that I'm going to cover tonight is basically what's happened to date this year. So a lot of the statistics you'll see will go from January of 2008 to August 31st because we still are calculating September since it's not over. The majority of the info that I'm going to talk about is the type of data that I collect on a daily basis, how this information is shared within the department, but also within the neighboring law enforcement agencies, and also the community. A bulk of the presentation is going to be statistics, so it's a lot of numbers and percentages. Feel free, if you have questions on a particular slide, go ahead and ask instead of waiting till the end. And then the final few slides that I have are basically just some crime prevention tips that, with the help of Montgomery County, I put together. Okay, so a lot of people don't know exactly what crime analysis is, but my job, it's really significant because it basically does all the data collection. And right now what I use is an Access database. I actually have a software program that also does the same type of thing, only makes it a little bit easier, that I will hopefully be installing on my computer soon. And I also use ArcGIS to do a lot of mapping. But this information that I use helps identify patterns and trends that are going on not only in Tacoma Park but in the neighboring jurisdictions. On a daily basis, I create products that I'm sure some of the council members, even community members, have seen. Each Thursday, I think it is, I put together a weekly crime summary. It lists crimes that are happening in each beat, and it also lists the arrests and the addresses and dates and times and whatnot where they occurred. For the department, I create a lot of crime matrices, which basically these consist of just taking notes on what day, what time of day, different descriptions of the suspects, different items for a crime that are unique. For example, like a residential burglary where the suspect is breaking the kitchen window. So you sort of try and identify those things in a matrices. And particularly our Tactical Enforcement Unit and CID use these a lot to try and connect cases within the city and in neighboring jurisdictions. I also have been creating a lot of different crime alerts when I ID patterns and trends of crimes that are going on. I try to send out not only to the department but to the community different alerts. For example, just in the last month we had a lot of thefts from vehicles, and tried to pick patterns or key characteristics such as the type of car that was being broken into and how they were making entry. And then I also create departmental community flyers. Just last week I created a flyer for the armed robbery / kidnapping that occurred, and disseminated that throughout the area, and we actually got some people who had ID'd some of the people in the pictures. But my job is really important. It helps determine what contributes and causes crime in the area. the three things listed there are all things that are contributing currently. Number one is opportunities, for example, leaving your car vehicle unlocked or your back door unlocked. That just, opens the way to someone breaking in, walking around late at night, or the people who are walking around late at night on, their cell phones or wearing headphones. Those are all things that create opportunities that make you a target for crime. And then the second, which I'm sure everyone is aware of at this point, is the economy. And that's going to contribute quite a bit, I'm sure, in the near future with the amount of crime and statistics that we may see go up. And third on the list is the approaching holiday season, and also the fact that daylight saving time is coming and it's going to continue to get darker. So sometimes crimes happen more at night, so these, in the next coming months we may see an increase. Sharing all the information that I put together is extremely important. I call it the 3 C's: communication, collaboration, and cooperation, which are all extremely important in my line of work and in the police department as well as the community. As far as disseminating materials, not only do I send the information out to other jurisdictions, but it's reciprocal. All the materials that I create, they go to departmental staff, city council, neighboring law enforcement agencies, and also something called MCAC, which stands for the Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center. And this, I submit the information to them, and they distribute throughout not only the state of Maryland, but also to Pennsylvania and Delaware. And this is actually an extremely useful tool. You'd be amazed at the number of hits, or, people will identify individuals, or, they'll relate to cases that you're having in your area. And then another source for sharing information is the number of meetings that I go to. There's the Metro Police Department. They do a robbery abatement meeting, which if I don't necessarily go, a lot of the information that I gather is sent with the detectives or the TEU who attend those meetings. I work with Mary Kendall, and we go to the CSAFE team meetings where there's Montgomery County representatives, PG County, probation, and then Tacoma Park, and we all go and share information in regards to the HE team area. And then finally, just like Chief said in the introduction, I did a lot of my shadowing with Montgomery County, and their 3rd District in Silver Spring has been a tremendous help, not only with training, but also which is providing me all sorts of information and tools. Okay, and then this is the bulk of the presentation where I'm going to go over some of the statistics. I'm sure you'll have some questions. Feel free, like I said, to go ahead and ask. These are the current 2008 Part 1 crime statistics. These are what gets sent to the FBI as part of the Uniform Crime Report.
Can you distinguish Part 1 from other parts?
Yep, your Part 1 crimes are your major crimes against people and property: homicide, rape, robbery. As far as assault, it's aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, which includes, the larceny from your cars, and then auto theft. So these are, when you think of serious crime, that's what this this data is for.
Is the simple assault below because it's not Part 1?
Yes, the simple assault, you can keep track of them, but as far as the FBI and UCR are concerned, that they don't even care about that number. They're more concerned with the aggravated assaults, which usually are much more serious or might involve a weapon.
Thank you.
It's a little hard to see up there, but this is just a map that is to date. It's really hard to see actually, but this basically is just a visual depiction of what the statistics were on the previous slide.
Are those sections? What are those sections?
They're by beats. So in your far left is the T1 beat, and then the tip is T2, and then the far right is your T3. And this is a 5-year comparison of Part 1 crime statistics. Keep in mind this is only from January 1st through August 31st. But as you can see, there actually is a decrease for 2008.
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask another question.
That's fine.
Each year is that chunk of time?
Yes, yes.
Okay, got it.
And then this is just your statistics. It's, as you can see in the corner, between 2007 and 2008, there is a 2.8% decrease.
It means crime's down, council. At least right now.
And then this is just a monthly comparison. I'm sure some of you know that August of this year, 2008, we had quite a significant increase. And you can see in comparing it to August of 2007, 39.3% increase. And a lot of the reason for the increase is the larceny and also the auto theft.
Do you have any speculations as to why?
People don't lock their cars. I mean, a lot of it.
Between August and, no, I meant between August 2nd and August. I mean, obviously, the percentage locking their cars probably hasn't changed much between August.
Could you back up one screen for just a moment, please? Thanks.
Do you have any thoughts on why this August was worse than the previous August?
You know, I don't even know, to be honest. I mean, even between July of 2008 to August 2008, there was a substantial increase, and it was pretty much attributed to your larcenies from vehicles and your auto theft. But in general, this whole area, Montgomery County, PG County, saw an extreme increase in those same types of crimes in their jurisdiction. So it wasn't just something happening here, it was all over the month of August.
Robert, was a pretty significant change.
Yes.
Is that true of the district also? Do we see the same thing?
I don't know, you know, all of a sudden, we went from having one of the lowest rates of thefts from vehicles and auto thefts to all of a sudden it just skyrocketed, and it just did that, you know, everywhere surrounding Tacoma Park.
I was at a meeting today with the chiefs in Montgomery County, and I brought up what had happened for us in August. And what's interesting, as Kylie said, there's been an increase in Tacoma Park, Silver Spring, DC 4th District, Hyattsville 1st District. It seems like this area, one of the things she mentioned in her presentation earlier was the economy. We've seen a large increase in day laborers that are not working now as a result of the economy going down. And there's been a lot more crime, and if you look at our nuisance crime, that went up during the months of August too. I think a lot of it's to do with the economy, but this area, for whatever reason, has seen an increase in all 4 jurisdictions. I might add on the larcenies from autos, we had 12 3 weeks ago. Of the 12 we had, 9 were vehicles left unlocked with valuables in them, which is something we continue to preach. Lock your vehicles, take your valuables in, and we put something out to the community about it. That makes it harder when we make it so easy.
And the definition of robbery is someone approaches you in person on the street.
With a weapon.
Yeah.
This next part, this is the best I could do since prior to my hiring. Statistics weren't really calculated by ward, so I tried, without making it too difficult, to sort of go back and try and compare, at least by beat, differences in crime. But you'll see what I did was, to try and help a little bit, I listed what wards were part of each beat, so you can kind of take note of which ward you're in. And I also looked at some of the key safety issues or crime issues that were occurring. So for the T1 beat, which includes wards 1, 2, and 3, there was a 32.5% increase in crime between 2007 and 2008. If you look over to the safety issues, a lot of this was attributed to your metro robberies that are occurring. There were a handful, especially at the beginning of 2008, residential burglaries from single-family homes. There's also commercial burglaries, particularly like Carroll Avenue, and then what we've been discussing, the thefts from vehicles. This is taking a look at the T2 beat. They actually had a 5.8% decrease. This is looking at wards 1 through 5. As far as Part 1 crime goes, the thefts from vehicles and the auto theft were key issues. But when we look at Part 2 offenses, this area tends to see a lot of drug activity, loitering, particularly on Maple Avenue, and they also have had some gang activity.
Can I ask, do you have an idea where the gang activity was?
A lot, Maple Avenue area is where, and it's not necessarily that they're doing anything there, but some people that we can associate with the gangs might live in that area or at least congregate there with friends who live in that area. The T3 beat, which is wards 2 and 6, they actually had a 13.5% decrease. Their issues tend to be robberies, New Hampshire Avenue, University Boulevard area. Commercial burglaries, they also have drug offenses, liquor law violations, and loitering.
Do you have a slide coming up that compares not the percentages, but the raw numbers in the 3 beats, or if not, can you just back up real quickly through those
Sure.
3?
So I'm not sure if I do have one. Go ahead.
The raw numbers. Just this one and the 2 briefly, so that it's 163 in T1, and then forward to T2, 138 in T2, and 173. So T2 has less than the other 2, but there's no one that is way out in front in terms of the statistics. Thank you.
The next few slides will look at your Part 1 crimes, your robbery, burglary, larceny, auto thefts. Each of them, there's a line graph that compares the last 3 years, 2006, 2007, 2008, and there's also a map to go along with each one, just for the year 2008. So this is your first one, robberies. The lines look a little bit alike. But yellow is 2008. It's actually hard to see.
Maybe turning the light off for this next series will help the yellow be a little more visible.
No, not much better. What's that? And this is just your map from January through August 2008. Each of the dots on there represents a robbery. Now this is pretty much inclusive of everything, but there are a few reports that may, for whatever reason, not be up there. And then this is your burglaries, also hard to see the yellow line. But for August, you can see that it is above both 2006 and 2007.
there could have been something that occurred.
Well, I know up near, in Ward 1, there's one that I know for a fact is not on there.
In North Dakota.
Yes. And this is your burglaries. The residential are the blue stars, and the commercial are the red stars. So, I mean, there isn't really a concentrated area. It's, you know, as you can see, the stars are spread out all over.
And is a residential burglary regardless of someone's home or not? Do you hear this term, home invasion?
When we classify, when I have to score everything to go to the FBI for the UCR, they do it by attempted. So if you know no one's there, attempted forced entry, no forced entry. So you know even if someone was there and someone is breaking in, it still counts as a residential burglary because they didn't have permission. You know the door could have been unlocked, but the person who lives there didn't say you could come in.
The key difference is a robbery is essentially a crime against the person. It's the taking of the property from the person, not from the premises. Burglary, you might have a homeowner home during burglary, but if the property is not taken from the body of the person, then it would be just a burglary.
And if someone is assaulted during the process of a burglary, that gets classified as both?
No, I would.
You're getting on a very difficult distinction, but if the person is assaulted, you could have it categorized as both.
It could be if the person is assaulted and they had property, like they had a cell phone in their hand and the person is with force standing in their home and the person who is invading the home grabs the cell phone and uses force, then it counts as a residential robbery.
We may want to turn the lights back up so people at home can see something on their TV.
All right, yeah, the yellow, bringing the yellow out didn't help much.
Well, that was just red, not yellow.
Do you think they can't see at home if it's dark in here?
Yeah.
Okay, and this is the same thing, just for larcenies. If anyone wants any of these maps or charts, and because you can't see them here, just send me an email or give me a call. They're all saved on my computer. I can send them to you.
And the difference between burglary and larceny?
Burglary is a structure. Like if you are breaking into a structure, where a larceny is like a best example. You're at 7-Eleven and you shoplift. That counts as a larceny.
Okay.
So
Taking something not from a person, but not in their home.
yes, it's a property crime.
You have a lawnmower in the yard, and someone goes in the yard and takes the lawnmower.
Yeah.
Okay.
All these charts are part of your all's packet also.
Yep.
And then this is your last, the auto vehicle thefts, which is also up from 2006 and 2007. But as you can see, auto thefts is all over, the board between 2006 and 2008. And this is just taking a look for 2008, your top 5 stolen vehicles. You can see number 1 on the list is a Dodge Caravan with 12, Honda Accords, Acura Integras. But your Caravans, for some reason, vans are really hot. So.
And it appears that 3 out of the 5 are all from one company.
Yes, yeah.
So maybe there's
Parts.
Oh, is it parts or is it
ease of stealing?
Well, I know they used to say before that certain products like Toyotas were easy to break into, but I think now like some of it is turning to the parts themselves. I know Jeep, although we haven't really seen that many here, Jeep products are the big item right now also.
Again, it's same, well, I think, same companies, no?
Okay, now I'll just briefly go over some of the nuisance crimes, which are the the Part 2 crimes that are occurring in Tacoma Park. And this is your year-to-date comparison looking at 07 to 08. There is a 35.1% increase. But if you look at your drug and narcotic offenses, it looks like there is a substantial increase. And there has been, but it's not a bad thing. Now that we have our tactical enforcement unit, this is a lot of what they do. Might not have been enforced quite as much before, so this is why the number looks like it's gone up a lot. We've made a lot more arrests, which is why it's 29 versus 112 in 2008.
Any sense of how much of that is just marijuana?
A lot of it, majority of it. I don't know off the top of my head like a percentage, but a majority is most definitely marijuana.
So large increase in crack cocaine also.
Yeah.
And powder cocaine and methamphetamine. And most of those arrests are felony arrests, they're not possession arrests.
This is selling, distributing.
Having an amount that indicates an intent to distribute money, and when we make an arrest, stuff that indicates they're selling drugs.
Okay.
This is your year-to-date arrest statistics, and how I did this was I looked at Part 1 arrests, Part 2 arrests, and your warrant services. And what I tried to do was to try to get a sense for who's committing the crimes in Tacoma Park. I looked at, of the arrests that were made, where the defendant's residency was, and compared this to neighboring jurisdictions. So for your Part 1 offenses, you'll see that there were 77 adult and 3 juveniles, and actually that Tacoma Park was the majority at 37.5% of the total arrests. And then at the bottom you'll see total for year-to-date, we've had 374 adult arrests and 7 juvenile.
I think what's interesting, Council, looking at these numbers is, I think there's been a perception in our city that a lot of the arrests are coming from the district. I think this obviously points out where a lot of our problems are coming from.
Now this is your Part 2 offenses. You'll see that Prince George's County is responsible for most of the arrests. A lot of this is your CDS, your drug offenses. A handful of the individuals who are arrested, I took note, are from the Hyattsville area, so they're not traveling too far, but for some reason they want to come here. And then for your warrant services, this was 33.8% or your total arrests were from Tacoma Park.
Can you say just a word about what warrant services are?
So if someone has a failure to appear, they don't come to court because I don't know what's it going to be.
Could be a driving while suspended, they fail to come to court, so they issue a bench warrant for a person. Or an officer or detective could obtain a warrant for someone's arrest on a criminal charge. Like detectives get warrants constantly for people, and a lot of times if they pull over a traffic stop, the running person's name to come up as being wanted based on this warrant, and so that person's arrested based on the arrest.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
So there would be lots of ways for that
Yes.
situation.
Yes.
You Tacoma Park, because you're more likely having a traffic stop or encountering someone who's from Tacoma Park than outside.
Most likely. I mean, most of the time, you have a lot of through traffic from outside people, so it kind of varies, but...
Like those warrant services, they would only apply to Montgomery, non-Tacoma, or Prince George's or the district if they were driving through, because you're not going to their homes to make the arrest in that instance. Isn't that correct?
Warrants in Maryland we can serve anywhere with the assistance of the jurisdiction. Obviously, we have to extradite out of D.C.
Most of these aren't served warrants, right? You encounter somebody.
Yeah, we stop them, we run them, we find out they're wanted, then they're taken into custody. If they're out of state, you have to determine if that jurisdiction will extradite if they're out of state. Before taking into custody.
Okay, and this is just looking at your criminal investigations division. I just looked at robberies and residential and commercial burglaries, and this just takes a look at how many cases they've had assigned to date. Of those cases, how many have been closed, and when I say closed, this is closed by exception or closed by arrest. So you see, of the 25 cases that were closed, 6 were by arrest, which is a 51% closure rate.
And you have to tell us what closed by exception is, and remind us, is this the year to date, or not 2008?
Yes. Yeah, this is from January 1st, 2008 to August 31st, 2008.
And closed by exception means?
Do you want to explain this?
It means we've identified someone that's responsible for the robbery. Give you an example. We've got several cases right now that detectives are working on. We've identified who did it, but they'll be prosecuted, let's say, in Montgomery County, PG. We know that they did it. We may not get a positive ID, but we have enough information that allows us underneath what we call uniform crime standards that we can close the case exceptionally. They're responsible. We're closing a majority of our robberies. It's just a slow process. They get caught in another jurisdiction. Then we try to put the pieces together that would put them with that crime. You don't get a lot of IDs on robberies because they correlate at night in the dark. If you've got a gun in your face, you're usually not going to make the best witness of who's arresting you, to be quite honest. And our better thing is to catch them after the crime, or catch them with the property from the crime, or another jurisdiction catches them and they confess to a bunch of them and they won't be prosecuted other than for the crime they've been caught with.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
And this is just looking at your residential and commercial burglaries. So out of the 52 residential burglaries that have been assigned, 7 cases have been closed, all 7 by arrest. So this is a 13.5% clearance rate. And your commercial burglaries, 27 cases assigned, 19 of which were closed, 4 of them by arrest. So this is a 70.4% clearance rate.
Might part of the difference in the closure rate be that commercial establishments tend to have cameras?
That's primarily. And this is just looking at your calls for service. It's a density map. So you can see over in the T3 beat, Ward 6, there's a primarily University Boulevard, New Hampshire Avenue are your greatest calls for service areas. And then you'll also see the other 2 dots in the center. One is the police station, which is...
That's not because they're getting calls, right? Why is it big and scary?
Walk-ins.
Oh, okay.
And then the other dot is the hospital. So, you know, if there's... what is that? If you
Is
go...
the one in Langley at the satellite station over there, or is that just that happens to be where a lot of people call from?
Well, if you go to the next slide, actually, I have the top 10 calls for service, or, yeah, there it is, the service addresses. I just put the number on there, but if you have a question about what the address is, I jotted down
And what's 1301 University Boulevard?
7-Eleven.
Okay.
And this is also, or I'm sorry, this actually isn't to date. This is just for August 2008.
This is August?
Just August. And then my last 2 slides are, I know Barb Matthews had wanted me to touch on some crime prevention tips. I looked at larcenies from vehicles and residential burglaries because they have happened quite a bit in the past year. As I think Chief said earlier, 9 of the 17 thefts from vehicles in the month of August all involved an unlocked vehicle. So some of the tips listed, I won't read them all off, but number 1 on the list is always lock your parked vehicle. Even if you're just going in the house for a little bit, keep it locked. Remove anything of value, your GPS, your iPod, your cell phone. I've read some places even having the suction cup mark left on your front windshield is kind of an indicator that you could have your GPS in the car somewhere. And then the last one is, if you're a victim, make the report. This helps me a lot because then I can see if there are a certain number of car break-ins happening at the same date, same time, if they're targeting a certain type of vehicle or even a certain type of property. And then for residential burglaries, there's a handful here, but I'll just go over a couple. When your home's unoccupied, always keep your doors and windows locked. Yeah. Another one is to use your commercially available locks or put a broomstick or dowel rod in if you have a sliding glass door. And then also take note when you go out of town or on a vacation, present the illusion that someone's home by using light timers, getting a neighbor to collect your mail for you. And also another tip that they gave was to leave your blinds and curtains in a normal position, but when you do this, be careful that you're not leaving your blinds up and then having things laying out on a table or counter for everyone to be able to see through your window. And then this is a very important one at the bottom, is to well, basically it's to make a list of all your valuables, record the serial numbers, take pictures, write a description out, and keep this somewhere. That way, if something were to happen, you could give all that information to the police, and it really helps them. They can compare serial numbers to property that they find. That was the last slide anyway. Well, that was the last slide anyways, but yeah, it's important to, record all your property. It really helps CID when they are investigating cases. It helps you get your property back. If you do catch someone and you recover property, it's a lot easier when you've got the serial numbers and pictures and everything to connect it back to the right victim.
Just leave it. Sorry. All right. Time to leave.
One job.
Maybe Sarah. Sarah, is that your BlackBerry?
We've got a presentation about crime prevention.
And I'll point out that I think a presentation like that might be a little bit easier for everybody, including folks at home, if and when we get the renovations to this room taken care of. I think it'll be a lot easier for questions to be asked on microphones and people to see the presentation and not deal with some of the logistical problems. Chief, I've got one question that I can ask, and it concerned the calls for service toward the end there.
Right.
Not thinking just about the month of August, but thinking about calls for service in general. You're on the microphone. I know that the rebate formula, a part of it is based on calls for service, I believe, and
Had been in the past.
Okay, it isn't anymore?
Well,
It's the calls for, it's
Okay. Well, the reason I'm asking is, I was wondering if, my sense was that that's a statistic that we've had in general, and I was wondering about the long-term trend in terms of calls for service over time, and whether that correlates to anything in particular.
We developed a formula which the county, working with the county on waiting calls for service, and I think we have a good formula that's fair to Tacoma Park, and it's fair to the county and how it's being worked out. It's a part of the final package. We're actually, Ms. Matthews and me are waiting for it to come back, and as that is, but we feel like we've reached an agreement on how they're going to base certain things that they give us, which obviously we'll be briefing the council on in the near future. But it's a much fairer method that we think we've come up with. It's fair to us and it's fair to them. So, but that'll be something we'll brief you on down the road once we're waiting right now to see what the final numbers are.
Right, okay. But in general, is there something that you could say about any trend in calls for service?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Total calls for service
You want to come up to the table?
follows two things pretty well. One is it'll mirror part one crime. So when you see part one crime going up, you generally will see calls for service going up. It also mirrors staffing levels, because some calls for service, particularly when you notice on those part two crimes and the arrests for part two crimes, those go up as staffing levels improve. So sometimes calls for service will go up as staffing levels improve as well. Different types of calls for service will go up, but nonetheless, if we staff the department well, like we have in the last couple of years with the chief here, we can improve the total calls for service. And if there's a portion of the rebate formula that is based on calls for service, that should improve as well.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a question for Kylene.
Where are you? Go on.
I was just curious, I noticed on one of the slides where you talked about your meetings and meeting with other jurisdictions, that Prince George's County was absent from that slide, and I wondered how the coordination is with Prince George's County and also the District of Columbia, if there's something that you need this council to do to try to improve our relationship with those two departments.
Well, actually, PG County, they recently, in the past couple months, they actually designated a corporal to do all the dissemination of information, and I have his cell phone, in my list of addresses, and he's really great about getting back to you, and he works primarily in District 1, which is great because that's who we neighbor. But if it's not something that's happening in District 1 and it's somewhere else, he's the type of person that I can go to. And if he can't answer the question for me, he directs me to someone else. I also have, there's an analyst over there who works for the entire county who also has been very helpful. They don't tend to have a lot of meetings per se. I've been to a couple, but a lot of the communication that I've had with them is just personal over the phone or email, or if I run into them somewhere, that sort of thing.
We get a weekly report from Tim that has all the crime statistics that Colleen distributes to the department. So they do things a little bit different in Prince George's County, and they're in a change right now, obviously because they're going through a new process. I have already had a conversation with their acting chief, who I believe will probably be appointed their new chief, who is taking more proactive towards the municipalities. That's been one of the complaints, and not that it's been a complaint for me, but it's more for the Prince George's municipalities have had problems working with the major department, which was pointed out in the botched drug raid they had over there. But their chief was at our national night out, their acting chief, and him and me have had a conversation. I've spoken to him on 2 different occasions concerning issues. We have a good relationship with them. Kevin Davis has been great to work with over in District 1. So they do things a little bit different than Montgomery County in the sense that they don't have as many meetings as we go to there, but she gets a weekly thing that breaks down all the crimes.
They actually have started putting out every day, every other day.
Yeah,
So
I think we're
it's-
getting it more than...
That's fine. I certainly didn't mean to imply I wanted you in meetings, but as long as we're getting the information,
Oh, yeah.
because
Yeah.
both jurisdictions will benefit by a good exchange of
Yeah,
information.
there's definitely a good exchange.
Right. And the next question, Chief, was, I know in the past we have shied away from providing our crime statistics by ward because of the potential for it to become a political issue. And I just wondered if that had been a consideration when I see that you're now talking about going back and...
Well, we give you get a monthly report by ward. It was one of the things that when I first came on board, it would help you all with your ward, what's happening in your ward. So that's the reason we do the report. We don't use it in a sense to figure out how we're going to do crimes, because we do our crimes by our 3 beats, and that's how we analyze crime, and that's the way I attack it. It's a thing for you politically. Before I put it out, obviously I discussed it with Barb, and she felt it would be a useful tool to all 6 of you, that you'd have what's going on in your ward specifically.
I appreciate it. I think it is valuable, but I don't want to politicize your job any more than it is normal. So.
Well, we had a long discussion, but we thought it was a valuable tool for you. But as you see tonight, we didn't break it down by wards. We broke it down by our beats, and we look at it that way. And that's the way I approach it from a standpoint. When she gives me the analysis, we look at it from where the problem's occurring in our city, not whose ward it's in or who represents it.
One of the things that you and I have talked about in the past is the seizures and forfeitures for drug cases. Those funds now go into the general fund. And I would appreciate, and this is more for the city manager, I would appreciate an opportunity to discuss that at the council and to understand kind of what the magnitude of that is. I believe that there's a benefit to this community by having those forfeitures going to the police department for public safety. And I think it's time we should put it on the table and talk about it.
Well, when you came to me almost 19, 20 months ago, we didn't really have much that I could have brought on the table. We now we're making drug seizures of major dealers. There is money now, so it would be a viable issue to put on the table at this point. Because
I appreciate putting it on the table, and also the fact that it's reached the level where it's important.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of money now.
And then lastly, Kylene, I would just ask that on your future presentations that you include the dates on all your slides. I know that some of those you saw and didn't have the what data was on the slides, and it's helpful to know that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Councilmember Clay.
Just say thanks. It's a wealth of information, and it's been really useful. And one of the ways that I found that it's been useful is I get phone calls from folks who believe that their street is the street with the most crime in the metropolitan area. And you look and you see that that's not the case. And so it's good to be able to give people something that can help them understand and put and use that to inform their perception. Because in an absence of information, it's hard to do that. And so having the quality information from the police department has been a really useful tool for citizens. So thank you.
And I think the maps are particularly useful. The comment was made about ward breakdowns, which is sort of nice, but people don't really even think of themselves as wards. They think of themselves as neighborhoods, a certain set of streets. So the map, I think, really brings it home to people to say, well, what is really going on in my neighborhood? Is my perception that crime's all over the place compared to the rest of the city accurate or not? And I think the maps really help bring some realism to that.
Well, I think the mapping, you'll see, we're in the process. We've gotten some new software, which is going to make our maps even better. And then we have a new program. When we get, we're waiting for a computer update right now, but once we get it, we'll be announcing a program which we will open up to the entire community, where we're going to do a presentation on a monthly basis to the community, similar to what you got. It's called ComStat, and we're going to do a community ComStat program, which I'll be announcing shortly. But we want to share this information with the community. If you walk away with one thing tonight, other than how efficient our crime analyst is that we need the community to report crimes. It's a bit. I know these numbers are disturbing, but I tell you what, they'd be a lot more disturbing if we had everybody reporting. And I'm going to look at Josh, because I know that in your ward, a lot of these auto things, there was a lot more that weekend that were reported, and that disturbs me that they're not reporting it. Everybody's crime is important to us, and the more crimes are reported, the better feel we get to where things are occurring, and we can do a better job. The other thing is we recover. I'll give you an example. There was 2 major break-ins of cars of tools. Lieutenant Sipperly's got thousands of tools we recovered, but because no reports are on and we don't have serial numbers and things, we're having a hard time. Rob, he's still here, I hope. We're having a hard time getting the tools back to the rightful owner. So it's important that people, these tips that we put on here tonight, I got to emphasize again, make lists of stuff. Make lists of your serial numbers. You get them when you buy something. Keep it in a folder so that you can report it to us, because we do recover a lot of property. My guys are running numbers of different things, especially GPSs, every night, and there's a lot of stuff that is recovered that we never give back. I could take you downstairs and show you some evidence room full of stuff we've recovered over the last 20 years that we haven't been able to return to somebody. And it's important that citizens report this stuff. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item, which is the proposal for an additional police dog.
You approved in the current budget a replacement dog, and in looking, one of the things we've tried to do is be more efficient in how we operate, and going to Montgomery County once again, based on some relationships I've had in the past and the fact that we've got a really good relationship with Tom Manger, we are now using them for training our dogs. They're assisting us in purchasing dogs. If you look at the breakdown, we'll be able to purchase a 3rd dog and only use the current money that you've budgeted, plus the grant money we have. We need permission to obviously get the 3rd dog because we've only approved for 2. My plan is to have a dog for each shift, and you say why. The canine is an important part of our policing today. When robberies go down, they help us obviously track where the defendants go. It gives us, even if we don't catch them, we know where to look the next time a robbery occurs, because a lot of our robberies occur in the same place. It's an excellent tool on nighttime burglaries, daytime burglaries, thefts from vehicles. All our dogs are drug trained, which helps us in a lot of our drug arrests we're making out in the New Hampshire Avenue corridor now. It's a valuable tool. When we don't have a dog, we have to rely on the Montgomery County. Sometimes we do go to the park police. Sometimes we do go to PG, but obviously there's a distance in bringing them into Tacoma Park. The dog is another tool in fighting crime today. I know there have been some problems in the past before I got here with dogs. We manage our dogs well. I've been here almost 2 years. We haven't had one person bit. We are very conscious of how we handle the dogs. We have good handlers. They go through very specific training. The training Montgomery County uses is something I'm familiar with for 26 years. That's why I moved over there and going to their training. We cut down travel costs. We cut down costs for dogs. We're able to get training for free. And as you can see in there, it's a savings to us, which allows us to go ahead with a 3rd dog. And I would obviously come back to you next year for a 4th. So all 4 squads would have a dog.
No other questions? Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'll just start out with the fact that I don't think Tacoma Park Police Department has had a problem with dogs. The problem that from our history related to the Prince George's County Police Department and problems that they had with handling dogs. I've been very proud of the work that we've done with our canine here in Tacoma Park. I have a few questions, though, about your request. How does it impact an officer's normal patrol availability if he's a canine officer with a dog?
It really doesn't affect him because he's still a part of the shift. He answers calls, takes reports just like anyone else. Obviously, when there's an incident where we need the canine, majority of our officers are on that scene anyway, a burglary scene, a robbery scene. No major impact where it's going to take away. Now, he does do a little bit more training than a normal patrol officer would do, but hasn't had any major impact on our ability, because you got to remember now we're at full staffing, so when one guy's off training, we still have enough officers on the street, so it doesn't really have a major impact at all.
I certainly appreciate us being at full staffing. That's
Which we have been for now over a year, and will continue to do so.
Do I owe you another cake?
No. I'll take a canine dog.
When we reach full staffing, yes.
With food, I presume.
So the officer does normal traffic stops and everything else that any other
He's
patrol
expected to
officer
do
would
the same
do.
amount of work as any other officer on the shift, takes reports. We have our corporal, so he can also be an assistant shift commander, he'd be the shift commander. We're able to do that. That's one of the good things you can do in a small department. You can specialize and still do multitasking. And this way would give us another tool in our fight against crime, and it's for officer safety too. I'd rather send a canine officer in with his dog than have officers going through a house or a business at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Sure, I understand that. You talked in our cover sheet, you mentioned some of the downside of the reciprocal arrangement with other counties of having to call dogs in and maybe having to wait an excessive amount of time or not having a dog available.
Montgomery County's been good, but I'll give an example. We've had a couple things on day work, and we had to bring them from Upper County. Now, Code 3, they can get here pretty fast, but I will tell you, it's a longer response time. And having 4 canines would reduce that. I mean, Montgomery County is great, and we reciprocate to them also, but sometimes it would help if we had ours here in the city. Obviously,
Were you talking about a future request? You said having 4 canines?
Well, I wanted to make clear to you all that this wasn't just one tonight, that my overall plan, because we're trying to plan for the future with this department, is to have 1 on each shift. And this would give us 3, and next year I'd come back for a 4th. Obviously, I'd be looking for grant money and other ways to fund it as I did this year, but we're going to save money by working with Montgomery County now.
Okay. There's a flip side to the reciprocal arrangement, though, and that is when another jurisdiction needs a dog, our officer responds to that jurisdiction and is taken off the streets at Tacoma Park for that period of time. Do you have any statistics you can provide to us, how often that's happened in the past, or?
We don't have any. Obviously, we'll be keeping some statistics on that. I mean, right now, we only have 1 active dog.
Well, we've had 2 for a while, though.
Yeah. Well, we haven't very much since I've been here because the dog went down pretty quick. But we are going to respond to Montgomery County's request. Generally, it is Silver Spring because that's where the closest, and they have quite a few dogs in Montgomery County. And so that really hasn't hurt us. If anything, it increases the good working relationship we have with both departments.
Right. Will the dog also be available for work in Prince George's County?
I know that we've answered that request before. We don't get it very often.
And just a little side thing, does Prince George's County now respond to Tacoma Park requests for dogs? I know there was some blip there for a while.
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. How would the dog be trained? Would it be a drug dog, or I know in the past?
It'll be multi-trained. It'll be able to do drugs and searches.
Okay, but there was some discussion of having a bomb dog in a dog trained to do bomb location in the past. And I'm not supportive of that. I just want to make sure that...
I don't think there's a need for... I mean, there was a time when Homeland Security first started out, they were giving them away, and you'd be foolish not to have taken one. Do we have a need? No, we really don't have a need for it. If it comes up, Montgomery County has been great to respond for us, or there's several other jurisdictions. We don't need a bomb dog. We want a dog that's cross-trained in both drugs and searches, and that's what we're looking for.
Okay. Lieutenant, you jumped to the table. Did you have something to
add?
Just in case you needed some help with some questions.
Okay. I had one last question. That is, have you selected the officer who will be assigned to this dog?
We have 1 returning canine officer whose partner was recently retired, Corporal Largent, and we'll be selecting from a group of 5 officers who've submitted for the second dog.
Okay, and so you have a selection process you're going to go through for that?
Yes. Yeah.
And I would just like to say that I think Corporal Largent has my deepest respect, and I appreciate the fact that you're going to replace his dog.
Councilmember Wright, I saw your hand before, and then Councilmember Clark.
I was just curious, do we receive, like we do with the taser, or I assume a firearm discharge, would we receive a report if the dog engages someone in terms of biting, or I don't know what the term you all would use?
Well, when a dog bites, it's considered a use of force.
Okay.
And if you'd like a report, I'd be more than glad to give it to you. Like I said, we haven't had any since I've been here, which is kind of unusual in this business. But we've been down to one dog now for almost 6 months, right?
Yeah, but Shadow was sick before that. So.
But I think we have 2 good canine officers, so I think that attributes, some of it can be attributed to that.
But I have no problem. I'll make sure. I'll add that to my list.
Councilmember Clay.
I support the replacement of the second dog and the addition of the third dog and the fourth dog, and I don't want to report every time the dog bites somebody. I have enough reports in my box. The taser one is really all I want.
Councilmember Robinson, and then Councilmember Sniper.
Are the dogs housed here in this building?
No. The officers, part of the when we budget, they take care of the dogs at their house. That's part of being a canine officer.
I see. So the dog lives with the officer?
Yeah.
And a normal shift is 2 officers in an automobile, and a canine shift is 1 officer and 1 dog? Is that
No,
am I hearing that right?
1 officer to 1 car, canine officer, it's canine officer and his partner, the dog. That's a 2-person car, we call it.
Okay, two being car. Thank you.
And very quickly, do you find that having this is looking in your previous experience, Chiefs, is there a recruiting benefit or some similar benefit? Do we tend to keep people longer if we have?
One of the things I'm trying to do is to get officers, we're offering more training. We want our officers, see, one of the things you do in a small department is you can specialize in different areas, and we're doing a lot more of that. What I will probably do is report back to you some of the training we've done this year. Lieutenant Bowers we're trying to broaden out so more people are involved. We have different sergeants doing different roles in the department. So it's canine officer is an attractive tool. Actually, the department I left in Front Royal added 2 dogs in the last 3 years since I left. It was one of the things I wanted to do that wasn't real supported within the department. After I left, they decided, well, maybe we ought to do this. It's been a real good, it's a recruiting tool because it offers the officers more things to do.
Right.
We now have officers that can be detectives, they can be tactical, they can be canine.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, it's definitely helping us attract people, and it's going to help us keep people.
Because that has been an issue historically in Tacoma Park. It's a very small department, and there's not a lot of promotion capabilities, and so learning new skills is actually one of those things. So I really appreciate that. Yeah.
And if I can just observe that in my time up here, this is a very different conversation about adding canines than I'm used to having. It's usually
I understood that.
It's usually a much tougher sell, but I think that reflects very well on our perception of the department and the great strides you've taken and the feedback that we're getting that this is really important and doing a great job, and the diversity of things that goes into that. I can see this as part of the mix. As I read through, I could see the handwriting on the wall even before I got to page 2 that this meant that there was a request for a forthcoming.
Well, so did your city manager. She says, "Are you ready for a 4th dog?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." And you better put it in there. And the thought I had when I got to that part was,
it would be helpful to understand, I guess, when we get there, or any sense that you can give us now of the relative priority of that to other things that might kind of take that chunk of money from the budget, because you might get some grant funding to help it, but it might, if you didn't, what would the dollar figure be for adding the 4th dog if you didn't have any grant support or anything else, but it was just, we're putting this in the budget and it's going to cost X?
Probably got $9,000.
And if that 9,000 is...
I can tell you that 9,000's in my seized money already, that could pay for that dog. And you could justify it with the amount of drugs we've been seizing, because we've got close to, it's a big figure now that we've got of seized money. So that would pay for it in a sense.
And I'll have to tell you that when my colleague mentioned the seized money, the first thought that came into my mind was, well, sure, we can pour the seized money in at the top. What do we take out of the bottom to make up for it?
And keep in mind, speed cameras will be up and running hopefully in a couple months, and that money comes back to the law enforcement also, and to pedestrian safety, but it has to go back into the police budget. So there's several areas of the funds that will be coming back into the department. But, you know, we are at a stage now where we can really discuss. When Councilman Stevens came to me, I guess right after I started, I said, well, there isn't any money that we've seized, and now we've put some things in place. We're doing a better job in certain areas. We're seizing more money. We're making more arrests. So there's areas that's going to generate revenue, which will help pay for some of these things. And one of the things that Lieutenant Bowers has initiated as the new commander of patrol is that we're going to be keeping better statistics on what our canine officers do. Because I think you're entitled, before you do give me a fourth dog, what are they doing and how are they doing it?
I would just like to emphasize that I am less supportive of the fourth dog and look forward to seeing your statistics. I think just the fact that maybe you have the money isn't a good reason for spending it.
No, and we want to be able to, show you what the dogs do. I mean, we've heard without the dog, and it's made a big difference. And I think bringing the dogs back and what they can do in a lot of areas is going to assist us.
And knowing how much of our officers' time is spent in the other jurisdictions, supporting their needs for a dog is also an important statistic.
Okay, so I'm hearing that the council will be supportive of the replacement of the second dog and the acquisition of the third dog and consideration of a fourth dog to come later.
Right.
Any other? Thank you for that. And we'll move to the last agenda item, which is proposal for a CSAFE intern. Interns, plural.
I'm going to let Mary present this proposal. We've worked with Councilmember Berry on this proposal. It is for an area that is obviously a big concern to me because most of our crime in Tacoma Park is occurring in this area. And we think this is another way of enhancing our ability to do a better job in that area, which is a very troubled area and communication because we have so many different people from different areas of the world, ethnic differences down there. So this is another way of working with the community, and I'll let Mary go with the proposal.
And I'll note that you're also joined at the table by Erwin Mack, who, by the evidence of being in the room, he must be back from his various trips that he's been enjoying.
I think so. It takes a day or two to come back
Erwin
to reality.
was on a Mediterranean cruise, I understand, with his wife of 50-plus years. What was a little surprising, though, was to hear that his version of a Mediterranean cruise was a rowboat with his wife at the oars. And so no wonder he looks as relaxed as he does.
Things have changed in 54 years. But I was primarily interested in pedestrian safety while I was overseas.
And you'll be giving us a full report.
I can count on it.
But not tonight.
Praise the Lord.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. I'll just give you an overall picture of the proposal since I don't want to repeat what's already been written. But just basically overall, the goals of this initiative are to prevent crime, improve communication among the stakeholders in the Ward 6 neighborhood, and also reduce the perception of crime that is apparent in that community. And we proposed that 2 interns are hired to focus their efforts on education, awareness, and increasing community involvement. And specifically, some of the tasks that interns would do would be distribute flyers, distribute newsletters, do door knocking, organize community events, organize and attend community meetings, and come up with creative ways to distribute very important information that's needed for crime prevention and general safety, domestic violence literature, those kinds of things. So overall, really what we're just trying to do is to build a more sustainable and cohesive community in that area. And I'm sure, Doug, there are a couple things you might want to add. I mean, Councilmember Barry.
Just before going to Erwin, who can speak on behalf of the business community and his many years working there, the sum of money that we're asking, while not insignificant, is not something that we're going to keep coming back every year and asking for. This is not a perpetual addition to the budget, but rather an opportunity to create something that is going to have high impact and will be sustainable for the longer term. The other point that I think is important is that CSAFE is not a new program that is in a trial phase or in its first year. It is an established program, award-winning, that has created tangible results over the years. And therefore, to help enhance and broaden and deepen its efforts is, I think, a very important step to improving the quality of life in that area, which has been such an issue, as we have learned through the community survey, and as I hear and see in my comings and goings on a daily basis. So I really believe that this is a chance for the council to go to bed tonight and wake up tomorrow sensing that they have done something very significant to improve the quality of life in that area. And Erwin, I wonder if you could also speak on behalf of this request.
I was delighted when you made the suggestion that this was even a possibility, and I was even more pleased that being able to work with Mary, who has been a significant value to the Crossroads in her role as director of CSAFE. And the statistics that your statistician shared with you before indicate that we do have a need that's unfortunate but real. The second factor that has been a frustration over the years, the 158 members of the CDA are a diverse group, and we have linguistic problems, but primarily in the building of 7676, where both our offices are, we have such a huge population, the clinics and the programs that are made available there, driver's school, insurance, and so on, who speak primarily Spanish and very little English. There's a need to communicate with them, even though they might not come from Tacoma Park. They're in that area, which is Ward 6. So we would see, working with Mary, since the CDA can't hire someone, and I'm a self-employed person subcontracting to the CDA, that by you're providing funding for CSAFE and through the police department, we could cooperate in disseminating information and gathering information to the people that I simply don't have the time or the ability to communicate with. So it's a shared thing that will be of significant value to the city and certainly to the residential community, the civic associations, as well as the business community. And some of the wise advice that was shown on the screen a few minutes ago would have to be disseminated on a one-to-one basis. Just simply passing out literature doesn't get it done. You've got to stand and talk with people and develop a friendship and a relationship with them. And this would make some of that possible, and we would hope that the city could see value in that particular area because of its uniqueness.
Let me add, this is a different area of our city. You don't see the folks from Ward 6 in here on a regular basis. The people we want to reach aren't going to come to the meetings.
No.
Doug has to seek out, because we go to a lot of meetings and seek out. These are people that are out there, I think, are actually crying. We hear them, but they don't communicate as well. It's a chance to reach out to a community that's in need. It's a community that it does have a major impact on our city. And I think it gives us the ability to go one step further with CSAFE and with Mary's outreach efforts. There's a lot of outreach need there. We want to bring the people. We want them to feel comfortable in reporting. I think we have a good rapport with the community down there, but I think this would improve it. In meetings I've been to, we only get a couple people. We need to actually go out and seek them and bring them in. And I think if we do that, we're going to have the ability to reach a part of the city that sometimes is very hard to reach, but I think government officials and as a police department, community policing is partnering, and sometimes you have to go find your partner and bring them in. It's a lot easier working in Ward 1 where I'm going to hear from the people and I know what their situations are, or in Ward 2 where people are, but in Ward 6, a lot of people aren't speaking out, but they need our services, and I think if we reach out to them, I think it's going to make us a better government and we'll better serve the people that we want to serve.
Can I just add one point, too, for the colleagues' sake? Tonight, a number of us attended a reception just before the meeting started, and I came across one of the leading realtors of the area. I won't mention her name, but she was there at the gathering, and she said that property was moving faster than it had since the beginning of May. So the economy, at least, or the perception of Tacoma Park as a valued place to live seems to be rebounding. But she said with one exception. And I said, well, what was that? And she said, your ward. And she said properties are staying on the market for a long time. There's a lot of properties that have been seized by the banks. And I'm not a real estate agent, and I'm not selling my house, and I don't care whether the neighbors are able to sell theirs or not. But what really bothered me was her professional view that the quality of life in the area had deteriorated to such a point where the rest of the city was doing well, but our part of the city will continue not to do well. So my feeling there was reinforced by what I've heard, what the citizens have said in their surveys, that we really do need to pay more attention to that area, and it does need attention not only by our city services, which I think have answered the call, but now it's time to put a little bit of extra money into the area to see how we can turn this around.
And I just have one more point to make in general about community outreach workers, police community liaison roles. In my experience in working in immigrant communities in our CSAFE area, a lot of residents feel more comfortable reporting crime or reporting their concerns to a civilian who is in some way connected to a police department. We've worked with different community groups, and a lot of times citizens that only speak Spanish have been able to communicate a message through us, which we then relayed back to a police department about a particular apartment or a location in a community where there are drugs or prostitution. And then that enables a tactical enforcement unit to respond to that issue and conduct surveillance or whatever it is that they would need to do and make an arrest that way, as opposed to encouraging somebody to call 911 or make a report anonymously, which, although it is anonymous, it is still very stressful doing that, because in the community, when somebody's arrested, they typically find out why the police responded, and it's an anonymous call. So there are automatic assumptions made by the suspects as to who made that anonymous call in the community. And that can be a very awkward position for them to be in. But whereas using these liaisons that work for police departments, civilian liaisons, there's no way of really tracking who was the person that actually made the report.
Is that because the liaison sees so many people in the community? Is that what you're implying? Why is it harder to tell who spoke to a liaison than to someone who anonymously called 911?
Well, it's because, exactly, liaisons are out there door knocking, they're talking to everyone, they're in community meetings, they establish personal relationships with residents in the area. It's almost as if a liaison's identity is not that obvious. They don't walk around with a gun and a badge. They are a civilian, so it's not as easily recognizable that they are a member of a police department. So oftentimes it's not as public, it's not as obvious what their role is to other suspects.
Okay.
It's a trust thing.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Councilmember Clay.
Thank you. I'm trying to remember, I think that we have done some investment recently in Ward 6. We provided a little bit more money for the CSAFE program this year because we lost some funding someplace else. I think we also provided some support for extra code enforcement. And one of my council members has already written me and asked me if I was going to make a suggestion that we take this money and spread it across all 6 wards. And the answer to that question is no. And the reason is because I feel that this is a different dynamic. You have we have empirical evidence of what's happening here. You have a history with that evidence, and you have a specific gap that you're looking to fill over the short term that is something that we maybe take for granted in some of the other areas. So in my community, when we had a meeting about some speed bumps and other things, I got 60 or 70 people who came to meetings about the same essential speed bump 4 times in a row so that they could talk to me about it. And so I have people who come out. You can put something out on the listserv. There are people who are out, walking the streets to put out the neighborhood newsletter. SOSCA is constantly trying to re-energize to get a newsletter out, and they're in that process right now, and there are a lot of people who are engaged. And they are connected in a way. I think that your community isn't connected. And I think that we have talked a lot here this last year about how we're going to provide support essentially to wards 4, 5, and 6, and I think that's important. The University of New Hampshire Avenue corridor area that's there is one of the heaviest trafficked areas, and I hear what you're saying about the need to provide a service that's happening in the other areas because of maybe a different level of affluence that allows the internet connectivity, the time to go out and do the newsletter distribution and those kinds of things. And so I support this and wish you well.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wright and Councilmember Seaver.
I had one question and 2 comments. I just want to check to make sure. I didn't read every word of this, so I just want to make sure that at least one of the interns would be Spanish speaking, or maybe some of the, one of the other languages.
Well, actually, since both Gretchen and I are Spanish, that's up for discussion. But Gretchen and I, my staff and I, we're both bilingual in Spanish, English. And being that the Ward 6 community, I don't know if the second most spoken language is necessarily Spanish of those residents, and I'd like to see some other languages brought into our program.
Right.
For instance, there's a large Amharic is spoken, and French. So if one of those, right? So if our interns could speak some other languages that was not already spoken by the staff of our program, I think that would be a benefit. But again, that can be up for discussion.
We definitely, we're looking for some foreign language, if they help.
Great. My comment would be, it sounds like these people have or will need the skills of a community organizer. I know a much recently maligned term, but I think a very, very valuable set of skills, having been a community organizer myself. My mother has been a community organizer around for the police department in Boston. And then lastly, I would just say I'm very supportive of this. I think that we committed earlier this year to doing as much as we could to address the quality of life differences in the city survey by ward. And I think we need to try, depending on wards and what the needs are, we need to try different things. We may not be trying this in another ward, but that's fine. We should try this, and maybe we should end up funding it for longer if it's very successful. So I'm supportive.
Councilmember Snipper.
Yes, this is more an observation. I want to compliment you on the table you prepared, project objectives and methodologies on page 5, because it has what I would call, you call it desired outcomes, I would call it goals, and then you have a method for achieving it, and then you have performance measures. And I think this is a great model for what the city could do on a lot of other parts of our budget, is identify just this kind of thing. So I commend you for providing an excellent example that I hope the council will use on its own deliberations.
Thank you,
I thoroughly support
Mr.
Yes. I thoroughly support this as well.
Thank you. I had a question for you, Mayor. It says this money comes from the unappropriated, that was proposing to use the money out of the unappropriated reserve.
It points out that that's one source, yes.
Yeah, it's a possible source of the funding, and it says we have $390,499 in the unappropriated reserve, and this initiative will cost $30,000. What do we normally draw the unappropriated reserve down to 0 each year?
No.
Okay.
No,
So
we normally take up any requests, any calls on the unappropriated reserves. We try and wait till the second half of the year. We take things as they come and see where we need to go.
Okay, so we're dipping into it for a second time early again, potentially.
If we approve this, yes. What's the turnaround on, if this is something that if we said yes and the funding were there, that you'd be ready to go out on the street?
We'll be starting next week.
Well, we'd be advertising.
We'd be advertising, that'd be the start.
So, a quick turnaround.
Definitely, we're ready to go.
And then my next question would be probably for the city manager, and that is, Chief Rakucci has told us that we have realized a significant amount of money in seizures and forfeitures. Is that money that would be available for use for this project?
If I understand correctly, that money goes into the general fund at the moment, and the funding that's being proposed for this initiative is also coming out of the general fund. It's not specifically earmarked for it.
The money you're talking about, Councilman Siemens, there's a process for it, I think you're well aware. We have seized the money, we've seized a lot in the last 6 months, and then there's a filing procedure. It takes generally a year before those funds would be turned back to the city. So to get started right now, those funds aren't available at this point for the manager to look at. They will be down the road, for future funding. I wouldn't
spend it yet because we don't have it.
We don't have it. You can't spend something you don't have yet. Is what I'm
I
saying.
appreciate your approach.
If I can suggest that what we might want to do is, if we're inclined to say yes to this request, that we ask the city manager to come back with an evaluation of where we are on a number of factors. As we've heard a couple of things, including the highway user fees and things like that affect the bottom line, and maybe a sense from her on where our finances are, so that if we want to dip into the unappropriated reserves at this point in the fiscal year, we know the full impact of what that might be, look for any other possible pots of money that we think might be there, and then move forward at that point if we have the sense from the council tonight that this is something that we want to do.
Could we also maybe get a read as part of that, just checking back with the county on the pool? Because I think the other thing we dipped into the unappropriated reserve for was $50,000 for the pool, and it's unclear, I think, right now where the county is.
There's still some issues with that the county is working on, yes, and Councilmember Leventhal is working on that. So, if I can continue, I know that Councilmember Berry mentioned that the community survey had mentioned the need for additional emphasis in wards 4, 5, and 6 because of their low participation in the government and in community events. And this money would be targeted just for Ward 6. I think it's important for me as a council member for Ward 4 to point out that Ward 6 has the highest crime rate in the city, or one of the highest. I'm not sure if it's exactly the highest, but it certainly appears to be. And it's a serious crime problem in Ward 6, whereas Ward 4 has the lowest crime rate of all wards in the city. And although I think that it would be extremely helpful to have this type of support for outreach within Ward 4 and Ward 5, I certainly feel comfortable that the need is compelling within Ward 6, and so I will support this.
Was there somebody else who had a comment? So, is there general agreement that this is something that we want to do, and that we will ask the city manager to come back with the information to enable us to make a final decision? I don't see any heads going back and forth except mine looking to my colleagues. So I think that's a tentative yes with a better sense of where we are financially, especially given the upheaval in the rest of the world's finances, and wanting to make sure that as we go forward we are cognizant of our situation in that larger picture. Erwin, yes.
And unrelated but related, if you haven't been to the Crossroads, as I haven't been for 2 weeks, I was delighted to come back and see that a significant portion of the median fencing has already been installed, and it's very attractive. We will actually have one of the nicest looking median barriers, if you will, that I've seen anywhere, because it fits in nicely with making a point, but not Guantanamo style. And although Marion said she saw somebody swinging along the bars, hanging onto the sloped area anyway, so we're always going to have some of those.
With a stroller.
Yes, with a stroller. So you have a right to be proud of what we were doing in Ward 6, and we're setting a model, if you will, for many of the other SHA projects, that one's going to be the nicest looking of all.
Mayor, if I could, I'd just like to thank the council. We had a lot on the agenda tonight from the police department. We appreciate your continued support. And, it makes a difference in the department. And I think, as you can see from our crime analysts, even though some crimes are up, we're making more arrests and we are closing more cases. And hopefully that'll be a trend that will continue. But we appreciate the support and moving forward with the department. And we are developing a strategic plan to take us into the future. And some of the things we are presenting, and we'll back them up with data as we go forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and we're adjourned for the evening.